Hi everyone, and welcome to Guitar Talk. We're missing one person today. Unfortunately, Walt couldn't make it, so the producer's taking his place. Back with Ken Umack, and we're going to continue with some more blues, so let's enjoy.
Well, we're going to do blues in G today, G and C, and right now we're sort of like vamping around on a G chord, and if we take it one more step, we can go to the C. We'll do a 12-bar blues for you. So what are we doing here? Blues in G and C.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Present a different problem than we had with E and A. E and A, and we also looked at drop G. Those keys, we have a lot of open strings here to play. The bass, we can play monotonic bass, or we can alternate the bass. We've got plenty of open strings in E and A. But when we get to G, we've got G. That's about it.
Yeah.
And so actually the styles start to change there. Many of the early blues guys played more of an alternating bass when they played in G or C. And it gives the blues a different flavor. Probably the best examples are Mississippi John Hurt, who's really a songster. He could play just about anything. But his style and technique is emulated by everybody that picks up the guitar and starts to play. They always start out with a Mississippi John Hurt type tune. And they have to learn alternating bass. So one of the things you do, if you haven't already figured this out on alternating, you've got to sit there for a long time and get that thumb independent,
Yep. Oh,
just going like this.
Yep, it has a mind of its own.
And you've got to be able to talk and do it.
Oh, yeah.
And switch chords and do it. Now usually, they'll, instead of going to the G, many times they'll alternate between, on the 4 chord, between the C and the E, the root and the third. It seems to be really common, more so than going back down to the G.
Yeah.
Not that they don't, but
No.
okay.
But in general, a lot of the alternating is between either the low E string and the D string or the A string and the D string. That it tends to be, that's the majority of the alternating.
Yes,
You find a way to
exactly.
fit it with any chord you're playing.
And then they tend to alternate usually root to an upper note as opposed to C going down to a G.
Right.
A lot of the patterns. And then the C going down to G is more, I think, more like that white country kind of thing that was going down. But you know,
Yep.
it was used in both media. So
Yeah. So the next thing you do with this is use your other fingers to put in some blue notes. And it just so happens that, you know, there's B flat right there. I also use the 6th right here, more so than when we played in E and A. The 6th becomes more of a melody note here on the beat, whereas before it would be used syncopated, maybe only for an 8th, as an 8th note maybe. But here, the 6th on the E, I was thinking of the A as the 6th for C chord, yeah. But they use this E here. As a matter of fact, Spike Driver Blues, if you want to give us that,
Yep. So,
utilizes that E. Excellent.
yes.
do that again.
Get it down. That alternating bass just goes.
Yep.
But I want to point out to the audience where that E was. That's that E right there.
Yeah.
Now he's returned to the B note, which would be the third of the chord.
So what you're basically doing is you're almost suggesting going to the 4 chord there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're keeping again, it's almost a bit of a monotonic bass with the alternating bass to keep the G underneath both those chords in its own weird way. You know?
Yeah.
Well, it also acts kind of like you said, hinting of the
Yeah.
C chord, of the sus. But the C chord would also be the sus of the G chord.
Right.
And then you got the actual C note, which you could actually add in, and you got a lot of songs that go with that kind of progression.
So one thing about interesting, because I think I've explored G more than you have. You've explored E more than I have, E and A. But what's interesting is, yes, you do lose the open strings as bass notes, but what you gain is all these open strings for melody notes, right? And that's because basically the guitar is tuned to a G chord. It's E minor or G, however you want to think of it. So there's a lot of open strings above the bottom that you can use. So I've spent countless years sitting there with a G chord, just doing this. And this is my finger picking G, one finger. You just put one finger down, you play, and you're having a good old time.
Are you going to the 5?
Yeah, I'm going to G to the D string, right? And then what you have is above it, you have all these beautiful notes. And then the idea is learning how to add those notes and not disrupt this alternating bass. So I've worked on countless different kinds of patterns, taking a pattern, which is a lot of Mississippi John Hurt's patterns. It's a lot of the pinch, thumb finger, pinch, thumb finger kind of patterns. And then just playing around with different ways of moving your fingers against those patterns. And also, here's one thing that I've often taught my students, which is one of the most important things to learn about playing is to learn how to play with the beat and play in between the beat, which I think I probably mentioned a little while ago. But this one, you can really work on it because you got this nice steady beat going. And then it's just basically combining those two aspects, and you're finger picking.
Right.
This is going to become a Monty Python routine,
Yes.
And you too will be finger picking.
And it moved on past World War II into
Yep.
both Merle Travis and Chet Atkins.
Yeah.
With that, a lot of that alternate stuff he stole to become part of his own legacy as a musician.
And this is actually in this key and in C also. You mentioned the patterns. It's like the first time we really run into patterns.
Right.
But when we're playing in E and A, there's no pattern picking really.
Right. No.
But here you get it, and it's unfortunately, I think it's unfortunate, but maybe it's beneficial. But most people start finger picking with the patterns. And then have to unlearn the patterns.
Right.
And I think I did the same thing. I think when I was a kid, I learned the patterns. I had a Carcassi book, a classical guitar, and it had all these little patterns in there on A minor and E minor. And then I had to unlearn patterns, be able to play and not think of patterns anymore.
Right.
So I don't know where you should start. You've got to do both.
You got to do both. I think the patterns just takes a little more pressure off having to create everything. So you have a rhythmic pattern, and now you're just manipulating notes and chords. You're learning how to fit that against it. Whereas with playing just the monotonic bass, now you're thinking about what rhythms am I playing along with the chords and the bass part and all that other stuff. So I just think you can simplify it. But yes, you do get locked into that whole idea of now I'm playing a pattern and my hand wants to do the pattern all the time.
I find problems with the patterns when you start going into alternate rhythms as opposed to 4/4 going into like a 3/4. I find that the patterns become difficult to do because none of them seem to be in a 3 or 6 or 12 form. Where actually you probably get by with a 12 because it's so similar to a 4/4 pattern. But I find that a lot of the patterns don't facilitate those more waltzy keys, waltzy tempos type of thing. But yeah, the patterns. Everybody, I think, starts learning patterns. This was... I can't do it anymore because I'm... See, I'm going to the lower G. I roommated in Los Angeles with Jerry Jeff Walker's Jerry Jeff Walker, right? His former lead guitar player when he moved out to Los Angeles, Doug Giddings, and he's the one that got me involved with these. But they're patterns, yeah, they're definitely patterns.
Yeah,
right.
And you see the boxiness of it all too. You feel that it's not going to go into a 3 at all. All right, I'm sorry, I've taken up too much time. Go back to you guys.
No, so we were just going to demonstrate some slide playing in the key of G.
Yeah.
Because we have this nice, lovely guitar tuned in an open G chord.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So you can do Keith Richards and the Rolling Stones
Yeah,
too.
That's right.
I brought it because I just started fooling around with the open tunings. You know, I've always figured I don't have command of standard tuning. I don't want to mess with open tunings, but actually, it was like 2 weeks ago I decided, you know, when we were going to do this in G, I said, you know, I really ought to learn to do slide. And, you know, it's a big hole in my technique that's missing out of the Delta blues. I mean, you know. And I've tried to many times. I've played for an hour, but I never could get the right angle. But I sat down, tuned that guitar there in open G, and I said, the first thing I'm going to do is to learn to play without the slide, and where all the notes are. It changes, obviously, where the licks are. And you just got to find them, but it's surprisingly simple. Yeah? It's surprisingly simple. And Mark, I was hoping he played slide, and he told me today he did, so he's going to play a little bit.
Yeah, do you want to play some background, and I'll jam over it? So do a blues and...
C.
Bravo, very nice.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about slide technique, because I'm
I
really...
think before you should talk about slide technique, we should go back just a little bit before all this started.
Yep.
When we talked about the root notes, like in the key of AE, we have those. A was perfect for basic tuning because you had the 3. You had A, the 4-chord D, and the 5-chord E. When they went to G, because I've actually, when I was going to school in college, my freshman year, one of the dorm people down the hall played classical guitar, and I checked in and I said, oh, gee, that's a nice guitar. Do you mind if I play it? He goes, sure, not a problem, but it's an open D. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm studying this piece, it's an open D. So I believe what happened was they came with 3 tunings, and the reason we went to open G was to achieve those bass notes we couldn't get if we were in standard tuning, because on G tuning, the A turns into a G note. And the same thing with open D. Then the Hawaiians, because of the dang Portuguese, they started playing this thing called the ukulele, and we began playing what they call lap guitar, which they used to play with a jackknife. And because the ukulele tuning was basically a C6 tuning, their open chord was a C6. So I think a lot of the blues players from the late teens getting into the 20s took one thing and combined it with regular open tunings that came from Europe, and created basically bottleneck, which is not necessarily lap steel slide. Just want to let everyone know that. So when you tune a lap steel, you don't tune it the way we tune the open D and the open G chord.
Right.
And then there's the accommodating keys. These would be called the slack keys because they would be down-tuned as opposed to up-tuned. Well, if you didn't want to do open G, you could do open A, which would be an up-tuning. And instead of open D, you could do open E, which would be an up-tuning. And now you create more sustain because you create more pressure by having the tuning higher. And by having the tuning higher, if you play slide, if your guitar's set up really nice in standard tuning, the strings are gonna raise a little bit because the neck is gonna bow a little more, giving you a little more room on your slide. So I'll bring it back to you guys, sorry.
Okay.
A little tangent there.
It's okay.
No,
That's good to know.
excellent.
Yeah.
I had an old slide book from actually a Stefan Grossman book.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was published in the, I don't know, 70s or something
No,
like
he
that.
ain't that old, so yeah.
And,
He's about our age, isn't he?
but I
He's a
found
little
it,
older than us.
A little.
and I was reading it. There's a nice 5 or 6 page little history of how slide is thought to have started, and it covers a lot of the things that you just said. But how these guitars came into the hands of the players is an interesting story also, because there was a huge craze at the early part of the 20th century there. And there was a Hawaiian guitar basically in every parlor.
Yeah.
And particularly women would play it.
Yep.
And eventually when the craze ended, there were just thousands of these guitars laying around, and they ended up in the hands of the black bluesmen.
Yeah.
You know, and they came with bars.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
you know, part of it's probably all connected.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then they, having a difficulty controlling the bar in upright Spanish style position, that's where the wine bottles started to come
Right,
in, and they would. I actually ran into, well, I guess you could call them hobos, but they'd be underneath the Santa Monica Pier when I lived out in Santa Monica, and I heard a couple of them playing slide, and I went up just like I read an article on Ry Cooder, basically the same story. You want to know how to make one of these? Not a problem. Give me a bottle of wine. So I went out and bought you got cheap wine. Well, that's okay. Well, there's 2 kinds of bottles. There's hand blown, which has the same kind of surface on the exterior, and there's manufactured, which has a seam. And they would sometimes scrape that seam, and you can buy slides that have different friction points on them. They're like little scratch marks, so they sound a little scratchier when you play them. And that's what they would do. And then they grind the ends of the bottleneck onto the stone until it became smooth enough so it wouldn't cut them to shreds. And that was pretty much a bottleneck.
Well, you should talk about this one, because this is the Corseiden.
Corseiden, well,
Yeah.
you can have that one.
Well,
if you want.
I don't really know that much about the history of it, other than I know it's based on a Corseiden
Cold medicine.
cold medicine bottle, and they just used it, I think, without any.
Allman Brothers, yeah.
Yeah, but without any alteration, right? They just.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that just seems to be the right shape, right sound, nice.
And if you're looking for a duller sound than glass, especially like if you're on a long scale instrument, that's why brass and steel slides are made. But instead of going out and buying a slide, you go to Sears and Roebuck and grab a Craftsman long neck until you find the right size on your finger. And they also use that. It's a very common slide in use. Little Feet, both of them, I believe, use Craftsman slides. Well, Craftsman, I guess it would be like maybe a 5/8, you figure?
Something
Yeah,
like
at least
Yeah.
for mine.
You'd have to go check them out, I would think.
That's right. You would
Check 'em out.
yank them out and
Yeah.
put them on your fingers. All right, go back to it, guys. Sorry.
That's okay. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good stuff. No.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit about slide technique. All right. The whole point about slide playing that I discovered, I kind of backed into slide playing because it's like you. I was always afraid of it. You know, it was like, oh, I'm going to be out of tune. It's going to make weird noises, and so and I can't do it that well compared to other things I can do. So I had a student who had thumb issues, and the thumb issues made it so he couldn't play at all. You know, and he'd been coming for a decade, so he still wanted to take lessons. So we just said, all right, if you do this and just move your hand up and down the neck, is it going to bother your thumb? And he said, no. And so we started playing slide. So I started learning some slide stuff for him, and I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with playing slide. And what I realized was a few things. One, it's all about muffling. It's all about right hand. There's a little bit of left hand muffling. You always have to be muting behind
Sure.
the slide, otherwise you get both sides of the slide
Right.
sounding. So that's one thing you always have to kind of get used to, this idea that just the first finger just glides. Now I wear the slide on my pinky because I like to be able to finger with my fingers. Some people wear it on the ring finger. Warren Haynes I know does. Bonnie Raitt wears it on the middle finger, quite dramatically. First finger I don't think would put it on, but it's possible. And then there
Well,
were
you need the mute, so that's why
Right,
it's
yeah,
never
exactly.
used
Yeah.
as the first.
So it's that, and that's just a preference thing. But the big thing that I found was that all this right-hand muting technique. And what I discovered, I started really studying Warren Haynes, because Warren Haynes actually does it in a standard tuning, and I'm more interested in doing it in standard tuning to use my knowledge that I have of my instrument.
Right.
So one thing he did, and what I started to find out, was he kind of plays this little package. You bring your fingers down to the strings, thumb, index, middle, and you're almost always playing with your index finger. You hop it a lot, so it's so then I go to my thumb at times when I do that, and then sometimes I play with my middle finger just on the high E string, just because it's there, it's just sitting there. But in general, it's a lot of just this hopping thing. And once I discovered this, and so to me, the charm of slide, which is the oxymoron of it all, once I learned how to not slide between notes, I understood slide guitar. If you always have to slide between the notes, it gets old. That you're always, right? But if you can, and start to play clean, then you can choose the slide, but you have control over it. Once I did that, then it was like, then I just did a lot of stuff where I would play with my eyes closed and just put on a background track and just sit there and and just go back and forth until and then I have, in my setup, my tuner's always on. So I would check it, I'd play and I'd look down and see how my tune is, I'd try it again, and I'd just keep doing that. And after a while, you start to get lock into it, and you stop thinking about it. The other big thing about slide is the vibrato.
I was going to ask you about that.
You got to learn the vibrato because it kind of hides your pitch, especially, and it helps you find a pitch. So you can kind of hover around a pitch, and as you play it, you fine tune it. You start to hear it being more in tune. So it's a lot of that is learning just this back and forth motion, and then as you do it, you kind of zero in on the note instead of worrying about getting to that note all the time.
Ironically, B.B. King loved that vibrato, and his proverbial butterfly technique of vibrato was because he couldn't play slide.
Right. Yeah, that
seriously.
That one.
Yeah.
Butterfly. Yep. So anyway, so that's that's kind of sliding.
Now that vibrato, I was listening to someone talking about it, and they mentioned about with the vibrato, you want to vibrate more flat than sharp. Is that?
Well, yeah. Well, in general, here's what's interesting about that is that's anti-guitar, because if you're vibratoing an unbent note, the only way to vibrato it is to make it raise it, right? So the only way on a guitar without a slide to do a flat vibrato is on a bent note, which is interesting. So that's part of what the guitar is about, is it's sharp. The guitar, I mean, that's part of the tonality of the guitar. It's a little sharp all the time. So this, Yeah, I say probably go a little more flat and come up to the pitch as opposed to going on both sides of the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's also common. That's also common in straight playing, where you'll slur. It would be a horn, a trumpet player or a clarinet player's term.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So there's always that upper, lower. Although going back down isn't too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you notice, when you go down, it's not. It's more precise. Da, 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 as opposed to.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, some of that's just the little blue notes where you can get in the cracks.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's somewhere in between B flat and B.
Right. Right.
And you're going, oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
That's where it going to be.
Yep.
Well, it's dissonance what makes music exciting. It's that it's what presents flavor to the whole thing.
So one thing I would say that the open tuning really brings to the game is if you want to play chordal stuff, it's now you've got all these nice straight across
Chords, right?
So you can really play easy chords because as soon as you go across, it's all chord tones.
Right.
So that's kind of the strength of the open tunings.
Right.
Yeah.
But then again, by having that happen, you can always find the bass note.
Yep.
And always have a bass note available to you.
Well, that's the other thing in this tuning. You always got the root fifth, root fifth,
Right.
root fifth. So you always got that nice power chord. And one thing I've worked on, even with the standard tuning, is learning how to find a lot of two-note things with the slide, because two notes is a lot greater weight than just one, and it's amazing,
Sure.
when you start doing that kind of stuff, and it carries a lot more weight, and yet it's only intervals. It's not really chords. You're
Right.
playing.
Right. Right. Well, it seems to be winding down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's see if we can maybe come up with a tune.
come
We're
up with
doing
a
G,
tune.
right? That's
Yeah,
what
we're doing
we've been playing with,
G.
so-
That's all we've been doing. So we got G.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with some more blues. Hope you're enjoying the series.